As you eagerly await College Football 25 coming to your gaming console, College Football 24 is on the horizon, and a team with a chance to build on big success will have its leader join us, as Eliah Drinkwitz will be on the show shortly. This is the College Game Day podcast for Wednesday, June 5th. Rece Davis and Pete Thamel here. Pete, as I look at all of these not really preseason rankings, but the power rankings and stuff, you got the good old Missouri Tigers coming off an 11-win season, a victory in a New Year's Six Bowl against Ohio State, hovering right around that playoff cut line at 10 or 11.
Oh, yeah, and I do think as a resident of the state of Massachusetts, I can talk about Massachusetts in a more overt way than others. I think part of the case for Missouri being a playoff contender is built through their schedule, which features a lot of the state of Massachusetts. Their Power 5 non-conference home game is Boston College. They open Murray State, Rece. Then they have Buffalo and Columbia. Then they have Boston College and Columbia. Then they have Vanderbilt and Columbia. They'll go to College Station October 5th. Now, we'll know a lot more about Texas A&M by then, right? Like Mike Elko has basically said they have good bones there at A&M last week in Destin, and he was quietly confident, especially on that D-line. I think their D-line is like really good, and I think that will be a very difficult game. But if they get past that, they come to Amherst, Mass. Think about that for a second. An SEC team is going to play at the University of Massachusetts McGurk Stadium in Amherst, and by then we'll know if these Missouri Tigers, Brady Cook, Luther Burden, if they are ready to compete in the SEC and be in this playoff conversation.
Well, as many over the history of college football have said, and I echo because I believe this with every fiber of my being, you don't just waltz into McGurk Stadium in Amherst, Massachusetts, and expect to roll your headgear out there and get a victory. You're going to have to go earn it.
That is correct. There are going to be a lot of that must be a typo on the schedule that week when that when that game happens. But yeah, it'd be if they could go win at A&M and they come out of Mighty McGurk with a win. Auburn visiting Columbia on October 19th could be like a seminal moment for that program. Again, no matter what state Texas A&M is in, I will never just gift someone a victory there. That is a very difficult place to play, even when A&M might be a little off there. So I'm certainly not going to do that. But you would have to think right now they'll be favored in that game.
Yeah, and they go there, new coach. They go to Alabama, I believe, new coach. And because of the schedule things that you have mentioned, a lot of their other difficult games, relatively speaking, are at home. Mm-hmm. And because of that, in Bill Connolly's SP Plus and the odds of doing this or that, the odds of an SEC team going 10-2 or better, Georgia has the best odds, and Missouri is next. Over 63% chance that Missouri will go at least 10-2. So there are big things on the horizon for the Tigers, and the head coach of the Missouri Tigers is Eliah Drinkwitz. Had a breakthrough fourth season at Missouri, brings expectations for season number 5. If you don't know Drink, he had a year as a head coach at Appalachian State, won a dozen games. Before that, highly respected offensive coordinator at North Carolina State, at Boise State, Arkansas State. Got to start with Gus Malzahn, first at Springdale High School in Arkansas and then at Auburn, part of a national championship staff in 2010 on the Plains at Auburn. And we are delighted to have our good friend Eliah Drinkwitz join the show now. Eli, there's very little carryover in college football these days. Yet you look at the SP Plus stuff, you guys have a lot of returning production. You've got some continuity in the program. You had the breakthrough season last year. So how has that impacted? How has success that you had last year impacted your returning players?
Well, I think success can have two different opportunities for you. I think the first thing it does is create belief amongst your team that what you're doing works, and now you just got to do it a little bit better. I think there's a belief when your athletic performance coach says, "Hey, we're doing this. This is why we're doing it," and all the guys can point back to doing it last year and saying, "Okay, this was the foundation to our success." I think the challenge is not resting on success, not believing what you accomplished last year has anything to do with this year or future results. And I think that's where a lot of people make a lot of mistakes is, especially in college football. And I think really now we're learning it more from the NFL is every year starts completely over and you have to relay the foundation because you're going to have so many new pieces to the culture. You're going to have so many new players, coaches, whatever it might be, you're going to have to go back and say, okay, what's the identity of this year's team? We don't have Cody Schrader's leadership. We don't have Darius Robinson's talent. We don't have Ennis Rakestraw, Chris Abrams-Strain on the corners. We do have the same foundations, but who are going to be those guys that step up and lead the way this year in the absence of those guys?
So I found one of the most interesting things about what you've been able to build there, Drink. One of the nuances that has been talked about, and I think is somewhat understood and misunderstood, is you look at Luther Burden and your ability to keep him as the, probably the best recruit to come out of the state in 10 years. And you look at some other really talented recruits from the state of Missouri. Williams Nwaneri, is that right?
That's close enough.
Close enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Top 5-star D lineman from Kansas City comes in for you this year. A handful of others in between. Describe to our listeners the nuance of the state law that has allowed you to attract and engage with these guys earlier than some schools.
Yeah. So very very early in the NIL era, our state legislature, former Missouri Tigers, really said, how can we embrace NIL to give us an advantage maybe over some other places? And one of the things that they adopted was the ability for us to utilize NIL once a player has signed with an institution. So once they either signed their NLI or if they had signed a financial aid agreement on early enrollment, they were able to start receiving NIL. And so, it gave you an opportunity to try to be really 4 months if they signed in September or 6 months if they signed in December ahead of where they should be able to receive NIL from any other institution. So, I think it was the mindset as much as anything. Williams was really the first case study in that. I will say this about Luther Burden. I think one of the best things about Luther, we sold him on the ability to really represent this state and that there would be NIL opportunities that would come to him more because he's from St. Louis, playing at his home university than maybe anywhere else. But the coolest thing about Luther is not one time has he come back into my office and asked about his NIL. He has never come in during a transfer portal window, during an end of a season meeting, or during a spring meeting and said, Coach, where are we at with our NIL? I've never heard from his agents regarding that. In fact, I called him in December. I'd met with all of our players and all of our different guys and agents and had done all those conversations, and he never came by. So I called him and was like, hey, is something going on? You've never come by. You've never asked about it. He said, Coach, I trust you. I'm sure you'll take care of us, whatever it's supposed to be. And that's been his mentality. Now, he does have a chip deal and he does have a lot of different other things going on. So maybe he's making just enough that it's not an issue. But I really think it speaks to his team first mentality that he's adopted. And I think that was one of the reasons that he really shot to the forefront for us last year was it really wasn't about him. It was about our team, the way he embraced Brady Cook, the way he embraced Cody Schrader. I think he had a really good line the other day in one of our deals. He said, hey, whatever Brady cooks, I'm willing to eat, and I think if he can keep having that mindset, we're going to be just fine.
Let me ask one more question about Luther, because I feel like as a first-team All-SEC receiver, second-team All-American, I think he had 1,200 receiving yards, 9 TD receptions last year. He is a bona fide star in college football, and he's going to then transition to being a star football player in America. He'll be on draft lists. He'll be a high pick. Just give us a little sense of his talent, maybe a comp, and what he can become with another year of development, Eli.
I think the thing that stands out to me is his competitive spirit with the ball in his hand, man. The dude just refuses to be tackled. He does a really good job in the biggest moments. You look back at that Kansas State game, he had an unbelievable take route in the first possession that we had to have. He had a little check down that the ball's not supposed to go to him, ends up making it into a touchdown. You think about versus Florida, game on the line, 4th and 17. He really doesn't even run the route that he's supposed to. He just kind of he calls it Luther instincts. He knew he was open, and so Brady threw it to him. He has this ability to understand. He's always been a gamer. In St. Louis, he's known as Touchdown Luther. If you want to score a touchdown, you just get the ball to Luther. And of course, in college football, you're never quite sure that that's going to translate. But so far, so good. One of his first mega moments for us was his punt return versus Abilene Christian. Lets the ball bounce. You're not supposed to do that. Picks it up off the bounce and returns it for a touchdown on his first punt return touchdown. So he's had several of those moments. I think for us, the biggest comparable for me is probably Deebo Samuel, and I know that is lofty expectation, but just the ability for him with the ball in his hand. When we played Deebo in 17, he returned the opening kickoff. I was at NC State, returned the opening kickoff against us, and then had 2 other touchdowns in that game, basically beat us by himself. You watch the way that the 49ers and Kyle Shanahan use Deebo Samuels as a big slot receiver, use him in the backfield. I think Luther has some of those same tendencies. I have to give Kirby Moore and Jacob Peeler a lot of credit. We had him as an X wide receiver, and they just felt like he was better as a big slot wide receiver. And in our past histories, whether it was Jacoby Myers for us at NC State or Thomas Burbeck at Boise State or several guys that Jacob and Kirby had coached, our slot receiver had always been our leading wide receiver. And so we felt like in order to get him more touches, we needed to move him into the slot. And that's really where he's excelled.
So you mentioned the SEC meetings without giving away any state secrets or getting any texts from Commissioner Sankey. Can you just give us, it's a fascinating room. You've been in some fascinating rooms with some fascinating people, Hall of Fame coaches. There's probably coaches we've forgotten about that were in the rooms in 2019, right? Like the world moves fast in the SEC. What are those meetings like? Give us a lot of alphas in the room, a lot of egos in the room, a lot of wins, a lot of national titles. What are those meetings like? What are the interpersonal dynamics like?
All right. So, I don't care. I'm going to tell you anyway. So the first time I was in the SEC head coach's room, okay, I walk in there and you've got Coach Saban, you got Jeremy Pruitt, you got Gus Malzahn, you got Dan Mullen, okay, you got Mike Leach, you have the Will Muschamp is the head coach at South Carolina, Jimbo Fisher. So it's elite of the elite. And I'm like, well, this old dorky dude's got no shot in this league. Okay. And we commence to, there is more accusations. It was supposed to be a 7-hour meeting, and it boils down to just accusations of this guy cheated here and he's cheating here and he's cheating in recruiting and blah, 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 blah. It's intense. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what it is. And now there's none of that. Like, there is so much mutual respect in that room. We're all pushing on how do we come together. Lane Kiffin and Kirby Smart were asking us to stay after the meeting so that we could have a formulated plan so that all 14 or 16 of us would be united in our approach to this roster limit conversation. There is a group text message that is sharing information so we can be on the same page, making sure that the conversations that we have about roster limits are united. So it's just a totally different dynamic than when I first started. It's interesting because I got a text before I went in there that said, hey, as one of the elder statesmen in the room, we need you to kind of set the tone for what we're trying to do. And I'm thinking, like, it goes Mark Stoops, Kirby Smart, and then it goes Lane Kiffin, Eli Drinkwitz, Sam Pittman.
Wow.
And all of us were there in the same year. And it's like, oh my gosh, that room has just totally flipped.
I know when I think Lane Kiffin, I think elder statesman.
Yeah, exactly. I think
do they count his first Tennessee time or no?
Well, he does, and that's what's important because he counts it. I will say this: Lane has revolutionized the style of the coaches in the SEC. Before it was pretty, pants, polo. Lane looks like he's either coming from a hot yoga class or he's fixing to go fishing when he's down at Destin, and I respect all of it. And so now you've got, Coach Elko showed up in shorts, Brian Kelly showed up in shorts. I'm like, well, all hell's broke loose. There's the quorum within the SEC head coaches.
This text chain I'm interested in. Sometimes if things get heated or maybe edgy or whatever, who's the first guy you got to remove from the chat?
Well, see, this is a united front. There's actually been a couple times where Coach Kiffin will send out whatever the motivational thing from hot yoga was that morning. So to make sure all of us have focused on a good day. So, there's really not a whole lot of edginess to it. There is some edginess. I will say this, there was actually a little bit of a back and forth the other day when we were trying to stay united on the roster number that we proposed and making sure arguments are aligned and challenging people not to cave in on the number. So, but nobody's removed from it.
What was the number?
Can't go there.
All right,
Can't
that's
go
fair.
there. Yeah.
That's fair. I had to ask since you brought it up.
Yeah, it's really a unique challenge because I think the people who are making the decisions, and whether that be lawyers or athletic directors or presidents, aren't necessarily in the everyday understanding of what it takes to have a roster or construct a practice. They understand what they understand from a macro view, but from a micro view, I don't think they understand what it takes to operate. And this is, in my opinion, the greatest game that we have in the United States, college football. Nothing unites the fan base, the entire country from coast to coast, whether it's college game day, whether it's, I was going to say Pac-12 after dark, but we don't have that anymore. Whatever it is, man, I mean, every state has something that they root for. And if we're not careful, we can lose that in a hurry. If people aren't aware of what happened in 1994 with Major League Baseball, I mean, it was at the height of its success, and now it's coming back, but it isn't what it used to be. I think that would be an arrogant ploy on our part, and so I think we have to be careful on how we settle this. And I think Elko said it best. They're asking us to take a 35% reduction of our roster to try to make the best sport, and they're asking us to play the most games we've ever played. That's a real challenge, and I think there's got to be some common sense to this that says let's not wound, whatever the strength is. I think we'd all agree that the strength of the NCAA is college football. We better not damage the strength that we have.
Next time I cut Rece off like this, Drink, I'm just going to call it my Luther instincts for the follow-up question. Yeah. So I'm going to use my Luther instincts to say, in Destin, we did not hear from you, or at least I didn't, on the kind of case for walk-ons. We heard some folks, Kirby, Elko was very passionate about it. He does coach at the place with the 12th man, so you would think there would be some walk-on affinity there. We know the heart tug storyline feel for walk-ons. I'm curious, for the case of the functional running of a day-to-day football program, can you walk through, in roster building, those two things, why walk-ons are necessary?
Well, first and foremost, it's player safety, and it's about being able to maintain the health and safety of your players throughout a season. The comparables to the NFL really have no bearing on college football because the way an NFL team is constructed, they have 70 healthy players at any one time because of the waiver wire, because of a practice squad. They're always able to practice at this same place. With what they're trying to impose upon us with roster limits, you would be set with a number of players, and there is no ability to add or subtract from that team for your entire season. And I don't think that's a practical way to go about it. I think the misunderstanding here I've explained something to somebody yesterday. In college football, there's only 4 ways to build a roster. The first one is to retain the players that you currently have. The second one is to sign high school players. The third one is to sign junior college players. And the fourth one is the transfer portal. But you don't have the ability to know how you're going to do that until the end of your current season. If we don't look and see what happened with at the University of Arkansas basketball program and John Calipari literally walking into a team and having nobody and having to rebuild a team, that is capable of happening in college football. because there is no way for you to currently manage your current roster. And so you could be walking in and taking over a team that has nobody. In our level of competition, not everybody that's in the portal is able or capable of playing at the SEC level. So you have to figure out, okay, how do I make sure that I have a current roster, high school signees, and transfer players that can compete at this level? And then once you build that team, let's say you have 85 players, say the roster number is 85. Okay, you're going to have at least 6 off the top have to go to specialist, because if you have a punter, kicker, and snapper, you have to have a backup, because if one of those guys were to get injured, which occurs, whether it's a lower leg strain, whether it's a fluke incident, your season's done. Let's remind everybody what happened to Florida State. One person gets injured and their season's out the window right there. They don't even get a chance through the committee to continue to move forward.
We've gone down through a lot of things that are facing the sport right now, but one of the things I think that sets you apart as a coach is the quick wit. So the question that I need to ask you: how long did you contemplate, or was it spur of the moment when you brought up Connor Stallions to me on selection day?
A quick phone call. Connor Stallions beeping in right here. I'm trying to get some signals here, so I gotta go.
No, I have to apologize because you.
No, don't apologize. That was so funny.
You snorted on live television.
Yeah, right? I did. That's true.
I feel like for me, like when I'm on, when it's over and I've got like 24 hours left and people are coming in to see me, I'm going to remind them I made Rece Davis snort on live television. That may go on. That may go on the tombstone. Okay, because that was like, honestly, I was sitting down in the chair and I had my cell phone in my chair and I was like, if the opportunity presents itself, and it was because we were going against Ohio State too.
Right.
I'm dropping a Connor Stallions. I got to. And it just kind of happened to work out that way.
Who's your comedic hero? Who's your go-to guy?
Jerry Seinfeld. It's Jerry Seinfeld. I'm a Seinfeld guy through and through. I think Dave Chappelle is funny as all get out. I can't pronounce Bugatti's name, but I think he's pretty funny right now, mainly because everything he says about not being able to handle anything around the house is completely correct. My wife sent that in the wives group text to the staff, and got me in trouble with my coaching staff. So it's, I think I think those guys are hilarious.
Favorite Seinfeld episode is the logical follow-up there.
Man, there's so many. I'm kind of stuck on the whale episode right now where Kramer's hitting the golf ball into the ocean, and George Fake says he's a marine biologist, and he says he was angry that day, my friends.
Have you seen our friend Rich Eisen had Jerry Seinfeld on recently, and he told a story about that episode, that original, that soliloquy that you referenced from George was not in the script until the night before. And Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David sat down, wrote it at like 2 a.m. So they walk in the next morning, they're shooting, I remember, in front of a live audience. Mm-hmm. And they pull Jason Alexander aside and they say, hey, here's a 1.5-page soliloquy. We need you to have it be ready in 30 minutes. And he's like, no problem. And Seinfeld told Rich that the incredulous look on his face when they cut away to him one time was not necessarily because he's about to reach into the hole of the great beast and pull out the Titleist. He said it was because, I'm like, this guy is nailing every syllable of this in front of the live audience. That's a great episode. Just saw it the other night.
I tell you what, I actually watched Seinfeld's commencement speech at Duke, and I think he's got a lot of wisdom. And I know
he does.
He's a funny man, but man, he has got a lot of wisdom, and there's a lot to him that I appreciate. I tell you what, I got into it when in college he was on his "I'm Telling You for the Last Time" tour, and I mean that's a DVD. That's the funniest 90 minutes of comedy that you can really get. I mean it's hilarious. But now he's taking it to a whole new level at 70, and I'm not. You know what? I haven't really got into Curb Your Enthusiasm, but everybody says it's pretty good too.
It's very funny. Drink, we've had you a while, but I want you to impart some wisdom. You said Seinfeld's a wise guy. I think that you are as well. Give me the benefits that a family can have by traveling on a commercial airline, say, where they just sort of call you and say, everybody run for your seat.
Yeah, let me tell you right now, if you want to really find out what your family's made of, you put them on a Southwest flight, okay? And you try to figure out, because we do it, and we got to, I don't buy A pass, okay? C is for center aisle. You can try to game the system a little bit if you can work as a team to go family boarding between A and B, or you buy one person an A pass and you make them go try to hold 6 seats. And I tell you what, man, you find out a lot about each other. My wife she's still really upset with me about that. But, I think you got to share adversity to really build that team, that strong togetherness. And if you can't handle a Southwest flight together in the middle of the summer on vacation, I don't know how you're going to handle the ups and downs of a college football season. I mean, the hatred that you feel from the fan bases on Twitter is very similar to the hatred that the rest of that plane has for you when your kid's crying and screaming because they can't hear, Dad, get me my Wi-Fi is not working. I mean, it's really very similar. And I think it's one of the reasons that our football team kind of took off is because our family got their crap together. And we figured it out on Southwest.
Your household incompetence resonates with the two co-hosts of this podcast.
Oh, yes.
who are not handy around the house at all. And we're going to wrap up here. Can you leave us with your biggest home improvement failure? Like, what is the one thing around the house you completely have failed at over the years?
There's not really much of anything I can do around the house, but the biggest failure I have is I don't have any tools. I mean, I've got a hammer, but like if they need me to fix something, I have this tool set that I got when I got married. So it's 19 years old. It's got half the wrenches in it. It's nothing. So I'm like, well, I'm going to give it the old college try here. The craziest thing is my wife has well, this is going to sound bad, but she's got a handyman. She's got a lawn guy. She's got a pool person. I mean, the number of people that it takes to keep our house running that just a single competent husband could do is mind blowing. And that's why we fly Southwest.
But you may be flying to the top. All of these preseason rankings have you guys right around that playoff contention level. Drink, always great to talk to you, man. Thanks for spending time with us today and enjoy that vacation.
Well, I appreciate it. I've had last season, there was a lot of accolades, but to get the text message to invite me on this podcast really brought me to the top and really had me have to refocus. And I'm going to have to be brought down a little bit after this to be able to be on this podcast with you also.
Well, there's probably a leak in your sink, so you'll be brought down by the time you get home.
Yeah. Look, football has a way to humble you. And if you get too high, the football gods always bring you down. But let me tell you, your wife has the number one way to humble you. No matter how high you think you are, there's always a dirty diaper that needs to be changed.
Thanks, my friend. Great job. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Pete, I don't believe that Drink gave us everything on the text chain. I've got intel that says there's a subtext chain among some of the coaches in which there's snarkiness, not necessarily just about other coaches, but it could be about you or me. It could be about, anything else that happens in the sport. I would love to get a look at some of those texts. He's a funny dude, man.
He is a funny dude. How about Luther instincts? You think that sticks?
Oh, yeah.
Just got Luther instincts, man. I got my Luther. I'm gonna run a go and let my Luther instincts take over. What a player he is. And one of the fun things about college football in general, Rece, and I hope as the sport becomes a little bit more homogenized with bigger leagues and just the general landscape changing, is the chance for a place like Missouri that has had moments of success, but not to say success, to have their crack at it. You need to have continuity. You have two linchpin in-state players come grow, build. Brady Cook, we didn't talk about him a ton. He's gotten better and better each season there. He's gone from kind of a game manager type to a guy who can go win you a game type quarterback. And so I think part of the joy of college football is optimism sprouts in different addresses. And Columbia will be a fun address to monitor as we go on.
And as many things as they have going for them, there are still some changes. It's June. There's more time for season previews when we do that later on in the podcast. But they do have a new defensive coordinator. They do have some real linchpins of that defense from last year that Drink touched on. Their two corners who were drafted, and it's Rakestraw and Chris Abrams-Strain, Darius Robinson, defensive lineman. So the defense is going to be a little bit different. And the defense has really elevated them over the last couple of years. Their defense has been vastly improved under Blake Baker, who is now at LSU, and Corey Batoon, who is at South Alabama. And they put together great defenses there, is now running the show at Missouri. And it was the defense, too. The one little story we missed with Drink was that it was the defense last year, some of the defensive players who, because Tennessee had sort of stuck it to them the previous year in 22. So when Missouri returned the favor, the defensive guys had challenged Drink to tell Josh Heupel at the end of the game that they stand on business. And so if you saw the quick handshake at the end and standing on business, that was a result of fulfilling a guarantee to the players, I believe. So Missouri will have an opportunity to stand on business and perhaps make it into this expanded playoff field. It's great to have Drink with us. Great to have you listening. We encourage you to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. But if you like to do things the hard way, just download the podcast wherever you like to get your podcast, or watch us on YouTube so you can see Pete's glowing face. We'll talk to you next time.